Which player on the Titans should you be buying right now in your Dynasty Leagues? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome into the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, everybody. I am Kate Magdziuk. You could follow me on Twitter at FFBallBlast. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Mosher. You can follow him on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Give the show a follow, hit that subscribe button. We are going to be previewing all of the buys and sells for every single NFL team all the way through July. So we hit the AFC North. We hit the AFC East. This week, we're working on the AFC South. So you're not going to want to miss any of these breakdowns, team by team, buys, sells, where to get these guys on the cheap. It's all going to help you build the ultimate dynasty roster. Marcus, I just have to say, we have a third co-host with us today.
If you don't know who we're talking about, please check out Kate's Twitter feed at FFBallBlast, and you'll find out who our third co-host is today.
It's a ghost.
Just leave it there.
It's a ghost, yeah. But that's a great social media pitch. But teaser, it's a ghost. Come find out what my ghost did to me at FFBallBlast. Just gonna tease that because I don't know. I'm feeling the heat in the room, Marcus, and I have a feeling maybe my ghost is a Titans fan. And he was just super excited for the show today. So he popped in to make himself known. But I don't know. When we get to the cells, we might upset somebody over here. So to keep it cool, we need to keep this podcast level. I think we should start off with some positives, like maybe a buy. Who's your favorite dynasty buy on the Tennessee Titans?
It's Derrick Henry for me, Kate. That might be surprising to you. I know it's not typically a good thing to buy a 28-year-old running back that has, 1,600 touches in the NFL already on his body, but it's Henry because we've seen him basically get better and better every season in the NFL. And Kate, we were actually seeing him get better even last year at the age of 27. We know what typically happens with Derrick Henry during the season, right? Usually starts off slow, but by the time we get to November, December, January, he's having monster games, right? He started the season out really fast last year. He was averaging 117 rushing yards per game, over 130 total yards per game in the first 8 games of the season, 10 touchdowns. He was on pace to be the runaway RB1. In fact, he was the RB1 before he got hurt. And now all of a sudden in dynasty leagues, he slipped to running back 10. But you can get him even cheaper than that because I'm looking at how people are ranking him. RB14, RB13, RB11. You can get him outside of RB1 prices. And I just don't understand it.
So I have to say I'm a little bitter here because as the Derrick Henry truther, I do have a Derrick Henry jersey that we're going to be moving here in a couple of weeks. And I've decided I need to get that up and framed because I was the Derrick Henry OG in fantasy, Marcus, and I was nay-nayed and poo-pooed. And now that he's 28 years old, everybody's finally on board. I love Derrick Henry. I think as long as he is healthy, he is going to continue to amass touches. But my question for you, looking back at 2021, that was actually the first year that we saw a career low, actually, in a decrease in yards per touch in Derrick Henry's career. 4.6 yards per touch as opposed to his overall career average, where he had only dipped below 5 yards per touch one single season, and that was back in 2017. So do you make anything of maybe the decrease in efficiency, 4.3 yards per rush attempt, which again, only second lowest in his career back to 2017, but just wasn't as efficient, though he was still averaging 117 rushing yards per game. Any concern about that dip in efficiency?
No, for 2 reasons. Number one, he got more targets last year than we're used to him seeing, and He didn't average a ton of receiving yards. I think it was 8.6 or whatever. He's had other season where he's averaged 11.4, 12 yards per reception. So that dropped it down a little bit. But again, remember what Derrick Henry typically does. He'll start the season off pretty slow, but by the end of the year, that's when the efficiency goes up. I'm looking back like at 2020, right? The start of that season, the first month of the season, he averaged 3.72 yards per carry. But by the end of the season, his total was 5.36. And in fact, if you look at like the last month of that season, he averaged, I'm pulling it up right here. In the last month of the season, last 4 games, 6.6 yards per carry. So this is just a trend that happens with Derrick Henry. So I think we would have seen him last year, see that efficiency go up. I'm just not concerned about it, Kate.
I think that's fair. I'm not sure. I think I'd buy him for the right price.
Well, can we
Any
go through
recent
that?
trades?
Yeah, let's go through some trades. Well, first of all, just straight up ranking. So these are the running backs that are being consistently drafted ahead of Derrick Henry. You have Cam Akers, Dalvin Cook, Breece Hall, Austin Eckler, Najee Harris, and then obviously Jonathan Taylor and those guys. But like for me, give me Derrick Henry over Cam Akers all day long.
Yeah, I think that feels about right for me.
Okay, and here's some other recent trades as of the last couple weeks on dynastyleaguefootball.com. Again, you can get him so cheap right now. Derrick Henry for pick 108 in this year's rookie draft.
Oh, wow. That's super interesting value. Yes, I'll take Derrick Henry.
Derrick Henry for Josh Jacobs and pick 202 in this year's rookie draft.
Oh, that's tough. I Derrick Henry if I'm going to win now. I do think that Jacobs might have some long-term value here. Maybe a little bit more career longevity, but yeah, I'll take Derrick Henry here.
Derrick Henry for James Conner in a 2023 second round pick.
I'll take Derrick Henry. He's
That's
so
the point.
safe. As long as he's on the field, he's so safe.
You can get him so cheaply right now. And if he only plays, he's going to play more than that. But if he's only an RB1 for another year or two, who cares? You're still stealing him at that price, right? If it's only a second round pick in a mid-level RB2 who's also older and also has injury concerns, yeah, why not? I'll give you another one. This is an interesting one. Derrick Henry for James Cook and Juju Smith-Schuster.
Oh, I am a huge Juju fan. I'm not a fan of Cook's landing spot necessarily. I might go for like Juju plus a different guy.
Okay. Again,
but
the whole point here is that you can steal Derrick Henry right now while people are getting concerned about his age 28. It's just he's a special running back, and the other thing about this, Kate, is he's just not going to lose touches. There's nobody in that backfield that's going to steal touches for him. So even if he sees a decrease in volume or a decrease in efficiency, it might not matter because he's just going to get so many touches. And the Titans, they can't get out of his contract for the next 2 years. So they're going to have no choice but to put 1,000,000 miles on Derrick Henry. Go trade for him right now.
I like it.
Okay. All right, let's get to a dynasty sell for the Titans. But before we do that, Kate, I want to tell you guys about Blue Nile. Whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has simple online tools that help you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as the setting style. Blue Nile will then handcraft a perfect engagement ring for you, and each ring is one of a kind. Make your moment sparkle with a jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Dynasty listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement. Use promo code LOCKEDON. That is promo code LOCKEDON. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside, because there's nothing worse than ordering something and then having your significant other kind of find it on the porch step and they know exactly what it is. Shop stress-free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. All right, Kate, let's talk about sells. Who are you selling from this Titans team?
Wait a minute. Just because I was on board with Derrick Henry does not mean I do not have a separate buy, Marcus.
Oh, go ahead.
Because I've got a very intriguing one. Yes, I am Derrick Henry's biggest fan in life and for fantasy football. But I've got another name and I need to throw it out there because this man gets no respect. And that is Austin Hooper. Okay, so we need to talk about Austin Hooper a little bit. So I think this was probably one of the lowest talked about signings literally in the entire NFL this offseason. Austin Hooper signed with the Titans this offseason after becoming a cap casualty with the Browns. Now, we've left him for dead, so to speak. Finished as the tight end 21 back in 2020, tight end 24 back in 2021. But I think we're forgetting that he had back-to-back seasons as a top 6 fantasy tight end where he was a excellent volume monster. And he was pretty safe. He finished as at least a tight end 2 or better in almost all of his games in both of those seasons. So he's got some upside, I think, as a receiver. He's in an offense that doesn't necessarily have a ton of competition at the wide receiver position. You have Robert Woods, who I love as a receiver, but is returning from a torn ACL. You've got Treylon Burks, who's a rookie. And initial reports, of course, you have to take all of these reports with a grain of salt, but initial reports were that Treylon Burks, he showed up out of shape, was looking rough, didn't look ready for these mini camps. And so I want to just pump the brakes because I think everybody's really hyped about Treylon Burks, but I think that they're forgetting that there's still a really easy pathway for Austin Hooper to get some nice targets. I mean, we know that the Titans are not afraid to utilize the tight end position. They're not overly big on, these jumbo wide receiver packages like we've seen the Bills, Rams, those teams where they're just 4 wide receivers. Who needs our tight ends? The tight ends, they actually ran pretty much at a higher rate than any team in the NFL. Looking at 3 tight end sets, Cleveland ran 17% of their plays with 3 tight end sets, which is bonkers.
It is, yep.
Philly 8%, which for a while there we had Zach Ertz, we had Dallas Goedert, so I kind of get that. But then there's Tennessee, who came in at 8% over almost 100 plays throughout the season, had 3 tight ends on the field. He's instantly the tight end 1 in this group. You have some capable blocking tight ends in Jeff Swaim. But, looking at what Austin Hooper did, he had some disappointing seasons, but, we're looking at what he did in the Browns. He kind of functioned as a blocking tight end, which I don't think he really profiles at. Blocked on over 50% of his snaps in each of his last 2 seasons with the Browns. Whereas with Atlanta, 29%, 35%, he was running a lot more routes. And I do think that there's going to be opportunity here for him to run more routes with the Tennessee Titans. I just think the value here is ridiculous, especially, I mean, he's a no risk, but relatively high reward. It's not like he was a one and done. He had 2 back-to-back seasons where he performed as a very usable tight end for fantasy.
Yeah, tight end 27 right now on Dynasty League football. Here's what you do with Austin Hooper. If you are in a Dynasty Best Ball League like we are in, go trade for him now because I think he's going to give you a relatively high floor every week because he's going to play 75 to 80% of the snaps. He's going to get 5 to 6 targets, and he's going to catch just about every single one of them. I just don't see the ceiling. He's not going to be a featured part of the offense. He's not going to be somebody that's getting a bunch of red zone targets. So go trade for him and just raise your floor a little bit. Or if you want to pair him with, let's say, a David Njoku or somebody like that maybe has a little bit more upside, I think that makes sense. In leagues where you have to set lineups every week, I think that's going to be a little trickier because you're not quite sure when to play him. But in a best ball league or best ball redraft league, I think that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about sells. Who in this offense are you selling? So you're not selling Derrick Henry. You're not selling Austin Hooper. Who are you selling, Kate?
Selling Treylon Burks, baby.
Oh, I knew that was coming.
I really like Treylon Burks. So forgive me for this
Hater.
sell here, but this purely comes to me as an opportunity to sell a player that I think could lose value to start the season. I think, we are looking at Treylon Burks, who, is absolutely a dominant wide receiver. And I think we see the opportunity there as just very fruitful, very bountiful, if you will, with AJ Brown being traded. It just feels like they really said, okay, AJ Brown, we can't pay you, so we're going to slot this guy in as a direct replacement. He just fills into that AJ Brown role pretty well, but he's not necessarily as great an athlete, I don't think. And now we again have these reports that he's not quite ready for NFL football. I think right now he's being drafted in dynasty startups as the wide receiver 16, which it's high. It's very high. He's being drafted ahead of guys like Michael Pittman, Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson, I think, is miles safer than Treylon Burks. The upside is to the moon, but I do think the floor is a bit lower for Treylon Burks, especially in his rookie season. So if I can move on from Treylon Burks and sell him at a wide receiver 16 value, I do think that's the way to go, because I don't think he's going to come in and instantly perform as we've seen a lot of these rookies do over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, here's what I think you should do with Treylon Burks is I don't disagree that you should sell him. Sell him for, let's say, Rashad Bateman, who's being drafted 2 or 3 spots behind him plus, right? Get Rashad Bateman, and then once the first month of the season happens and he's not playing a ton or he's not getting a ton of targets, then go out and buy him back, right? Because you're going to be able to get him quite a bit cheaper. I think that's a good way to maximize his value. I have a hard time believing that he's going to have a monster role early on, partly because Mike Vrabel he likes to ease these guys in. I think they're going to use a ton of Derrick Henry. And if you even want to wait a little bit longer, when Robert Woods comes back from his injury and he's the number 1 receiver, maybe that's when you go and buy him. But yeah, I think this is a good time to sell him because his value is already super high without him even setting foot on a training camp field yet.
Yeah, I think this doesn't come down to me not liking Treylon Burks.
It's just the value, right?
It's just the value. And it's honestly a surprise to me that he's crawled up as quickly as he did. And I do think that it's solely based on the fact that, we saw AJ Brown traded and they immediately took this specific player. But I don't think they're a 1-for-1 just quite yet.
Yes.
He's gonna need some more time, and I don't know, get some of that value while you still can, because he's not going to be sold at wide receiver 16 value.
No, there's
once the season starts.
Yep, no chance. Because what's going to happen is teams are going to be starting to contend, right? And they're going to say, hey, for example, let's take Mike Evans at wide receiver 22. Evans can help me win right now. I'll give you a guy that's only getting me 3 points on my bench for a guy that could be a wide receiver 1 any single week. Even though Evans is significantly older, I think it makes sense. You'll see trades like that. Or Devontae Smith, right? Devontae Smith is 23 years old. and already has 1,000-yard season under his belt, I think you could do that plus get something else. So
Yep.
do that, and we'll check back in on Treylon Burks after the first month of the season. Let's get to our dynasty holds, Kate. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local auto parts store to stock up on all the parts that you need. Rock Auto has everything from engine control modules and brake parts, motor oil, and even new carpet. Whether it's for your classic or your daily driver, get everything you need in a few easy clicks delivered directly to your door. Best of all, prices at rockauto.com are always reliably low. So go to rockauto.com right now to see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com today. All right, Kate, finishing up the Tennessee Titans here. Who is your dynasty sell?
Hold.
Hold.
We
Yes,
holding
who's your
now.
dynasty hold?
All right. So my dynasty hold, I've already kind of teased this before in the past when we've talked about Malik Willis, but it's Malik Willis. We're in a holding pattern with Malik Willis. There's not much that we can use him for now. And I think that's diminished the trade value that he's going to have. People know that he's not going to be starting at least this year. There's just not enough value there. So even if you're not a fan of the prospect Malik Willis, this is not the time to sell him. This is not really the time to do anything with him if you're in a position to contend. The only people that should be trading for Malik Willis right now are people that have enough room on their bench and are rebuilding. Otherwise, I think he's a hold. And it has nothing to do with talent, but more so opportunity. And there's just not going to be a bump in his value, I don't think, until he steps on the field. And then I think it'll shoot through the roof. But, if you're looking to sell, be patient, little bird.
So this was tough for me because I actually have Ryan Tannehill as a dynasty hold. So in 2019,
Oh,
in the 10 games as he started, he scored 29 touchdowns. In 2020, in the 16 games, he started all 16 games, he scored 40 touchdowns. I mean, you're talking about somebody that was scoring a ton of touchdowns until last year when he scored 20. He had 21 passing touchdowns. Like, he just wasn't very good last year. We saw the yards per attempt really declined. The total passing yards declined. Now, they did have a lot of injuries. We talked about Derrick Henry. A.J. Brown missed a big chunk of the season. Julio Jones was washed. Is there a chance that Tannehill can kind of get back to what we saw in 2019, 2020? Sure. And if that's the case, okay, we're talking about like a legitimate QB1 option that you can get far cheaper than that. Right now on Dynasty League Football, he's QB 22. 22, and you can get him so cheap right now. But at the same time, as you mentioned, they drafted Malik Willis. He looked awful last year. The playoff game is really concerning. I'm probably just holding him right now till I can see what he looks like in the first month and a half of the year.
Yeah, and I think it is it's certainly interesting. And I have been probably holding Ryan Tannehill as well, but more so because I don't know what to do with him, and I'm having trouble figuring out how to value him.
And that's why you should hold
But
him, right? It's because if
and
you don't know
that's
what to do with
yeah,
him, just wait until you get some more clarity on that situation.
yeah. Be patient, but I do when we mentioned Ryan Tannehill, we have obviously seen the upside. We've seen the upside in efficiency from this specific offense. I don't think it's going to change too much, but looking at his just contract and the money he's owed over the next couple of seasons, it's not good for the Titans. They're not in a good position. So they don't have enough draft capital invested in Malik Willis, but they've also got a lot of money still tied in
Exactly.
to Ryan Tannehill. So even if they keep or cut him or trade him ahead of 2023, he carries almost $19 million in dead cap in the 2023 season. That's tough.
Which basically
That
means
is
that it's going to be him. Tannehill's going to be there the next 2 years.
it's really, really tough. So even his yearly cash is at $27 million next year. So they only save really kind of like $10 million by offloading him on the roster. That is my biggest question mark. It doesn't come down to Ryan Tannehill because he's even a guy we've seen rushing upside from. But the interesting thing with Ryan Tannehill is the money and how are the Titans going to manage this money? Because like on Spotrac, they always give you, they always list out, if anybody hasn't been to Spotrac, I recommend it for looking at contracts, but they always list out a potential out year where they think that, okay, there might be some wiggle room for, team X to move on from player X. And their potential out listed is 2023. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, oh, that if I'm the Titans and I'm looking to get out in 2023, that's not going to feel very good. So I mean, he's
locked in for the next 2 years. I almost
he's
can't see
locked
I can't see a scenario where they move on from him before that. So
unless
2024,
he is injured like that. That would be the only stipulation, I think.
yeah, he's going to be there. So if you need a quarterback that's really cheap outside of the top 20 that gives you legitimate quarterback one upside, why not? But I think if you have him right now, you're also not selling him for quarterback 15, quarterback 16, because what does that really do for you either? You're not necessarily getting better. I think this is a good way to hold him. So, all right, that is it for today's show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Check out the Locked On NFL channel where they're breaking down all the latest news surrounding the NFL. You can download that podcast wherever you get your podcast, wherever you get our podcast, the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, same place. You can follow the show on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter at Locked On Dynasty. You can follow Kate at FF Ball Blast. She'll tell ghost stories all week, I am sure. You can follow me at Marcus_Mosher. And we'll actually be back tomorrow talking about another AFC South team. We'll see you guys right back here tomorrow.
Bye.